All right, we're back. It's a tough subject. Dennis Martin Gillan with Jessica Seals. Jessica, it's one of my favorite days, and I'm wearing my hat. This morning, I had my Camo Hat Club men's meeting this morning.
Hold up.
And
Hold up. I didn't
what's
tell
up?
you thank you. Dennis sent very quickly my hat. My nephew loved it. You should have seen the
Did it
smile
get
on his face.
did it get there in time? Because I had to
Yes.
FedEx it.
Yes.
Ooh,
Sort
it's
of.
not just a hat. It's a club, sort of.
Well, it got here in time, but my husband had back problems. We spent that night in the ER, and so I just gave it to my nephew. But I cannot express to you the smile that came on his face and how awesome he thought that was. And I was like, I want you to tell your friends what this means. So I just had to interrupt and tell you that.
Well, I appreciate that. I sent Jessica a Federal Express. I had to overnight it to get to your nephew in time. It's a hat that men tend to camouflage their emotions. I meet once a month with a bunch of guys. So I was really excited about that today. But the part that I'm really excited about, this is going to be a good day, is we have a special guest on the podcast today. That when I woke up this morning, I'm like, all right, I'm going to have breakfast with my dudes, and then we have a guest, rare appearance by a guest. And today we have Kim Burnett Bartlett from the Black Box Project with us. Kim, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. I want to hear more
Thank
about
you.
this club. That's super. That's amazing.
Oh, you want to hear a real quick plug for the club? And you see the hats behind me. It's when I went through a divorce, I moved to a small apartment, and I felt myself withdrawn in isolation, and that's not good for your mental health. So I ran into a guy. We had a communal coffee station in my apartment. I mean, I went from a big house to a small apartment. How small? If I put the key in too far, I broke the back window. That's how small the
Oh, my
apartment.
gosh.
Thank you for. Is this mic on?
Bad joke.
No, but it was tiny. It was like, seriously, it was 675 square feet. It was a studio apartment. So I met this guy. I said, hey, we should have breakfast one day. And thank God for this guy. And I'll tell you his name because he's a good dude, Will Raisby. He knew everybody in the building. He's just one of those guys. He's a connector. And I didn't. So he goes, yeah, I'll grab a few guys and we'll go to breakfast. So we started going to breakfast. We started out once a week, but that was too much. So now we're down to once a month. The first Thursday of the month, we meet for breakfast. And it's become this thing. And now it's on 6-7 years later. I need these guys.
Wow.
I recently had a major operation on my knee. Okay, 2 minor incisions. I had a meniscus tear, but one of those guys came and got me from the hospital. Because my wife was, she was helping her brother with another procedure. Like we just had double booked procedures that day. I'm like, wow, mine was minor.
Getting old.
That's it. That's what the doctor said. It was degenerative. I was like, what's that mean? He goes, it means old. So that's what the club is. It's more than a hat. It's a concept that men need to get together. 80% of all suicides are guys. And here we're going to come full circle with this. And on this podcast right now, my two, Jess's dad, your brother.
And you know what,
4 guys.
Dennis? I want to tell you, for the young men, you think old hat, whatever. It was
No.
important for me to give my nephew this because my nephew looks like me and my father. He never got to meet my dad, and he's 25 years old, and he's so passionate about this work. And it's so open talking about it. And so this hat was so special for me to be able to give to him. It really was.
And this dovetails nicely into what you're doing, Kim, with the Black Box Project. And we're going to get to that because men tend to camouflage their emotions and we have to uncover them. So for the audience perspective, I mentioned John already. Can you tell us, because it's a tough subject and everyone here seems to have some connection to suicide. Can you tell us your connection to a loss from suicide?
Yeah. So I think for most of us, there's the before and there's the after, right? So in the before time, I had no connection to suicide. I knew nothing, right? And I call that time blissfully ignorant. Wouldn't we love to go back, right? Yeah. But my brother, he was my only sibling. He was almost 11 years younger than me, and he was a Marine Corps veteran. He did not see combat. He actually wasn't in the Marines all that long, but he was out of the Marines for 6 years when he died. But he died by suicide in 2010. And it was relatively out of the blue for us. Even now, working in the field since then, looking back, knowing what I know now, still, he did not exhibit some of, I think, the classic warning signs. He was sort of a homebody. He was an introvert by nature. So maybe some things that might look like isolation to someone else was just kind of John. No, it was just kind of him. Yeah. But he was having some very lightweight legal problems in his life, very, very lightweight. We look back, he was 27, we were like, it's a blip in your life, but for him, it was huge. And so I think, that led to sort of his perception of, I have messed up my life. I can never recover from this. And of course, we know that, that wasn't true. And when he died, my family made a decision. My mom, to this day, I don't know how she sort of had the wherewithal to make this decision, but she said, we will be honest about this. We're going to, tell people. And, now having worked with, literally hundreds of families who have endured a suicide loss, I know that's not always the decision that families make. And I understand, right? I get it clearly. Mm-hmm. But I'm so grateful that she made that decision, because that started us off on a journey as a family. Both my parents have now passed away, but it started us off on a journey where, we were volunteering. We wanted to speak out, and support advocacy. It's funny. In the very beginning, my heart was not drawn to prevention. My heart was drawn much more to loss survivors, which is, I know now, is postvention, right? I didn't know that word.
Yes.
But, and now it ties, it all ties together, because good, solid postvention is preventative for us loss survivors. But I knew that I was so impacted by the support that we were able to receive early on, which was primarily peer support, right? I was living in Massachusetts at the time, as were my parents, and Massachusetts has a fairly robust suicide prevention budget, and did back then too. And a good chunk of that is dedicated to postvention. So there are supports out there. And my family, we got plugged into them pretty early on. And I think it made all the difference for us, getting in a room with people who understood this loss that just felt so foreign to us. We just felt thrust into this wilderness with no map, no compass. No one told us where we were or what to do next, We just didn't have any context for it, right? Loss by suicide, the grief is, I would never say it's worse or more difficult than any other type of sudden or traumatic loss. I don't know that to be true. I don't need to test that, to confirm it, but it is, there are layers, there are complications that I think maybe some other types of losses don't necessarily have to navigate. Mm-hmm. And so it was different. And we needed that peer support, connecting with people who have been through this, even though they don't have answers for us, right? They don't have, they don't have the solution. They don't have a magic wand to make us, feel better. But being with others who understand it, are enduring it as well, are maybe on that same journey, but a little bit further down that road. I mean, they're living, breathing examples of hope, right? Because if they can survive it, they look pretty normal. They were like, I remember my mom, after one of her first support groups, she was like, the other moms in that group, they look like they are eating and brushing their teeth and brushing their hair, and their shoes matched. And and in the very beginning, you kind of can't fathom that stuff, like how are we going to survive this? But that's proof positive that it is survivable. That peer support was everything for us. It truly was. And that led to me starting to volunteer, supporting suicide prevention in general, but with a little bit more of a focus. Again, I didn't know it then, but on postvention. And then I was able to start working in the field, first part-time, and then was able to start working full-time, supporting initially families of the military who had a suicide loss. And I was in that space for almost 10 years. And then I was able to jump over to the project I get to work on now, which is called the Black Box Project. And that is a really interesting, the way it marries, I think, support for suicide loss survivors and helping them, honestly, through their grief, but leading towards post-traumatic growth. That's sort of my magic, that's my special sauce now that I enjoy. And it's such a privilege to be able to come alongside people and, help them sort of process and do the work and get to that point of, okay, what am I going to do with my life now? How do I want to honor my person? What do I want to tell about this story? How do I do that? And I get to help people, with a piece of that. So that's amazing. And it's a suicide prevention project too. So we can talk more in detail about that. But that's a nutshell, my story, what led me here. Never, I would assume, this might be the case for the two of you, Never in a million years. If you told me this was going to be my life, if I was able to have a fast forward, a glimpse years ago, I would have never believed you, never in a million years. It just was not my life at all. So
imagine being like in third grade career day and they say, all right, Kim, what do you want to be? Everyone else like, I want to be a fireman. I want to be a chef. Like, I want to do suicide postvention. Right. They would have taken you down to the principal's office. Like, this kid needs help.
Right.
I have a question, Kim. I see MSW behind your name. I have a social work education as well, so love that. Did you have that MSW behind your name before your brother or after?
Oh, no. And I also, so, it feels like a previous life, right? But my bachelor's was in communications, and, my background was events and marketing and a little bit graphic design. But again, we're talking 100 years ago, so it was very different than what it is now. But so that really was my, sort of in the marketing world. That was my background. And I had in fact, someone asked me when I first started working for that organization that supports the military families, or I was we were in discussions of that prospect. And she said, "Are you a clinician?" And I remember thinking to myself, well, if I was, I think I would know. So I must not be. So I didn't even know what it was. And had no designs ever thinking that I would want a master's degree. But, once working in the field and my knowledge around prevention and postvention became very, very deep because of I was able to expose myself to the greats in this field and really, sit at the feet of and just soak up and sponge and learn as much as I could. I was convinced, I didn't know this, but I was convinced that a master's in social work, although I'm not licensed and I don't intend to be ever, it would give me the breadth. You know what I mean? I had the depth already, but I needed the foundation and the breadth. So, so that's what led to my master's degree, which I did during COVID, which I would never recommend, but not an ideal situation, but it was what it was. It got done and I'm glad. So
very cool.
I love when you were talking there, Kim, about the suicide. You said the word complicated. We're not trying to say it's the worst grief ever, because you don't want to get the grief Olympics. Which one's worse? Right. The worst one is the one you're going through, right? Mm-hmm. But it is a complicated grief for sure, and that's a fair way of putting it. It comes with that would have, could have, should have stuff.
Yeah.
And your brother John, I was writing notes here, just talking. He was 11 years younger than you. So he had two mommies.
So here I am, 12 years old, and we're in the supermarket, and he's, in the shopping cart and, looking up at me. Initially, he called me mama, mom, and I remember I glared at my mother. I was like, you need to make that stop.
You need to fix that.
No, that is not. But it's funny because I used to joke, it felt like we were raised almost by two different sets of parents. We weren't, but because I was an only child for so long, and I had Cheerios and watered down apple juice, and John had Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle sugary cereal and juice boxes, right? Like it was, he was the prince, and my mom is the youngest of four, so. All of my brothers, my cousins too, but they were all, my age and much older. And, John is the age of, of the second generation. So it was a lot of fun. He was a lot of fun. And, from a sibling standpoint, he grew up with me, but I didn't grow up with him, if that makes sense, right? He's 5 years old and I'm going to the prom and graduating high school. Yeah. But as he got older, as he was in his 20s and late 20s, that age gap seemed to matter a little bit less, right? As we are adults, I think that type of age gap, starts to have less of an impact on the relationship. And I that was palpable to me, like the last few years of his life. It was like, okay, we're getting to the point where even though I was married with kids and that was what he wanted most in the world was to find a girlfriend and a partner. But, it felt like we were coming to that stage in our life. And I was really looking forward to that, Yeah. So when he died, I had that just such a heavy feeling of like, I just got gypped out of that. And I don't get that now, really like we felt on the cusp of like a new season of our relationship. And it just felt, amongst everything else, but it felt like, that just got ripped out from under me. So. Sibling
Wow, that's a
losses.
lot to unpack. Yeah, I get you. My younger brother was 7 years, and it was right, 7 years difference. So he's 23, I'm 30, and we're like, it didn't matter. We were both
Yeah.
going out at the same time. You know, we were going out together. I took him on a couple ski trips with me. It was,
Yeah.
and it,
Yeah.
and we got
Yeah.
ripped. We got
Yeah.
hosed.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what happens with the suicide. Those years lost. Like this next week, March 10th, my older brother Mark, shoot, he'll be celebrating. He would be celebrating 64,
Wow.
and now he's forever 21. You know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
we're just sitting there going, wow, what if, could have, should have. The complicated grief that comes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Kim, I want to get to the Black Box Project. And I run a loss group here locally. And recently, a family got access to some digital stuff, and it set them back a little bit. You know, their words, not mine. Tell me about the project. I want to hear about, I think it's really cool, by the way. I'm a big fan, but I want to hear about how it started, what you all look at, and going forward, how can it help us in the postvention/prevention world?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for that, Dennis. So Black Box Project primarily is a data science suicide prevention project that really can't exist, wouldn't exist without lost surviving families choosing to partner with us in that effort. So Black Box Project is a project of a larger nonprofit called Stop Soldier Suicide. And Stop Soldier Suicide exists, and it's, well, since 2010 it was started by 3 Army vets who just were sick of losing their battle buddies at home after coming home from combat and, losing them to suicide. So they started the organization to do something since the very beginning in terms of how it supports, active duty and veterans. But now the prime focus is clinical treatment. So clinical care for, active duty or veterans who are experiencing suicidal crisis. And we really do screen in the folks that are, the highest risk, so it's free, it's telemental health care. It is absolutely confidential, which is very important for active duty folks because many times they don't want their command or, finding out or anything on their record that they're receiving mental health treatment. So that's sort of the main scope of work of Stop Soldier Suicide. But I'm not on that side of the house. I am on the Black Box Project side. And the Black Box Project is not limited to a military and veteran population. This is something that is open to and will impact the entire field of suicide prevention and postvention, I believe. So if you think about the context of aviation, right? We know in that context what a black box is. A black box exists, in an airplane when an accident happens. That black box will tell you, it's also the flight data recorder, right? It's the same thing. It tells you what was happening in the seconds and the minutes and the hours, days, sometimes weeks and months before that accident occurred. Same thing here, except in this context, the black box are people's digital devices. So what we do is we borrow digital devices that belonged to families, whoever their person was that died by suicide. We borrow that person's devices. We, again, it's a loan. We do not keep them. And we copy the data that lives on those devices. We do not connect them to the internet. We don't log into banking apps or anything like that. But we copy the data that lives on them. And there's a fair amount, more than I ever knew, that actually does get saved to our digital devices. So tablets, cell phones, obviously, and then laptops are the 3 types of devices that we work with. When we copy that data, we immediately depersonalize it and de-identify and redact anything. We had to create a specific program to do that. Redact anything that would be a personal identifier, right? Then all of that data gets pooled into a larger, what's called a data lake. And that lake of data is analyzed, looking for behavioral trends and patterns in this data set, knowing that it's a group of data that represents people who died by suicide. It's a known outcome, which is what makes this data unique, right? The project is about 5 years old. I have been with the project for 3 years, actually, this month. And
Congrats.
last summer, yeah, thank you. Last summer, I wish it was my idea. I wish I was one of the data science folks. They just have giant brains that work in very different ways than mine does. So that is not my side. That's not my expertise. But I actually was recruited to work on this project specifically for the role that I'm in, which is engaging with the families. We understand this is a ginormous ask. When we say, you meet me, here I am in New England, and I'm going to ask you, wherever you are, to send your loved one's device to our digital forensics lab in North Carolina. We're based in Raleigh, North Carolina. Sending your loved one's belongings, we know it's a huge ask. Because of my social work background, because of my postvention background, I don't know how to work with a family. I don't know how to approach a family in any other way than to, through that lens and offer resources and support and be a peer and, explore with them if participation is right for them, if it's something that they want to participate in. And so if they do, the process is, again, they loan us their device. Our digital forensics team does their thing and, they keep me informed. And then the devices go right back to the family, exactly as we received them, unless the devices are locked. If a device is locked, and that can be very attractive to a family, right? An opportunity to get access to a device that they didn't have access to before. My brother had a flip phone in 2010, but if he had a smartphone and if it had lots of, video and pictures of him, from him, I would love to have that, right? I totally get that.
Yeah.
We have the same software that the government uses, frankly, to unlock locked devices. It's been donated to us for this project. We could never afford it, right? We're a nonprofit. Through those donations, we are able to attempt to unlock locked devices, and we are usually successful. I am completely transparent with the families and say to them, look, it is not a guarantee, right? We cannot promise that we can unlock a locked device. If you're willing to let us try, we're willing to try. We'll do everything that we have. We'll throw everything we have at it to be able to do that if that's what you want. And then if the software is successful and finds the pin or the little shape of, depending on the device, what you have to draw or whatever it is, we do share that with the family if they want it, right? Some do, and some don't. And to your earlier point, with every family, I will say to them, if they are getting access to a device that they didn't have access to before, I will say to them, look, we don't create a report of a single device and say, here's the things that we saw in this device that, look like they led to, we don't do that for a few reasons. That's not the purpose of this project, but also from my perspective, and luckily, my direct manager who oversees the entire project, he agrees, there would be incredibly, I think, unethical. I mean, how could we ever? This holds, our digital devices hold incredible information, right? They know so much about us, right. But it's just one piece of the story, right? It could never tell the whole story of that person and their entire life. And, when aggregated with other chunks of data, it can be incredibly informative, but it's not going to tell the whole story of that person. The why isn't in here. That the one answer that, all of us are seeking, it's not in there. So we don't create a report like that. And I do say to families, look, if you are going through a device and seeing things that you didn't have access to before, I don't know what's in there, right? We don't, I can't tell you what's in there. I don't know. But I do know that many, many, many families have learned things that doesn't change what happened, right? Doesn't change,
No. Gone is gone, right?
Change that you love them. It doesn't change what happened, but it can impact your grief now. And to just know that and maybe, go into it with a trusted person by your side, a support there, right with you, just in case you learn something that you didn't know before and it's not necessarily helpful. I will tell you, through the years in my work with families, families do find things after the fact that, can be really harmful and hurtful and, and things they didn't know. It's not super common though, it's not. So, more often than not, we hear back from families and say, there wasn't anything in there that I didn't know, or we're so happy that we were able to get access to photos that we didn't have before. But that's not the prime reason that families tell us that they choose to participate in this project. We've had we're at about 160, 165 families that have participated with well over 200 devices, because many families will give us, a laptop and a cell phone, or, a tablet and a cell phone. And they share with us, in fact, some of them, they'll even, speak publicly for us and with us, that it is, this is my favorite part of the project. It feels so good to do something, to be able to contribute to the field in honor of their loved one, in honor of like, we're going to make a change. We're going to make a difference with this because, excuse me, we are not keeping this data, under a barrel, so to speak. We are not only sharing it with the entire suicide prevention field and, want people to use this data. We want, researchers out there. We are partnering. We have partnered with Harvard, USC, University of Wisconsin-Madison. We want researchers out there in the field, the folks that are building the interventions, to use this data, to have access to this data so that they can better understand how do we reach people before they get to crisis. And for families, that's really meaningful. That is a step towards, I believe, post-traumatic growth, doing something with that loss, doing something in honor of your loved one, and choosing to make an impact. We didn't get to choose that this happened to us, right? To our families, to our loved ones. We do get to choose what we do after, right? And what we say about it and how we tell this story and what we want to do with it. And so lots of families, they share like, that's our why. If I can loan you this device that, chances are has been kind of sitting in my house and maybe collecting dust for the last couple of years or, but yeah, I don't know what to do with it. I'm not going to throw it away. If I can loan you this device and his or her data can contribute to maybe so another family doesn't experience what mine did and what yours did.
That's it.
It's worth it. It's worth it.
That's the value proposition right there. You don't waste the pain.
That's
you
right.
literally take a device that's collecting dust. You nailed it right there, Kim. You said, listen, use this for good. Because we don't want any other families. We're in a club. We are no more members.
Right.
None.
Right.
And
right.
here you have a chance. I'm appealing to the listeners and the people out there. You may have a device that Kim described had dust on it or something. You get to donate it, loan it, which it comes back.
Yep.
And that's important. It comes back and you help the greater good.
Yeah.
Which is everyone wants to feel part of this purpose, a purpose-driven life. You want to feel like, all right, this happened. I never want it to happen again. How can I help?
Right.
Some of this
I
stuff is in
think
a drawer.
Well, I think from what I've learned from all of the families, suicide loss survivors, we seek meaning and purpose, I think, very intentionally, many of us, because this does feel like such a purposeless loss, right? Like, it's just, I need to make meaning of this. So to, do whatever I can. I mean, that's why I'll do what you do, right? I mean, this podcast, that's what I do, Yes. Do I want to help others? Do I want to save lives? Absolutely. Right. But also I do this for me because I get to honor John. Right. I get to,
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that, having an opportunity to do that. And this is a relatively, not everyone's going to go back to school and change their career or start a podcast or write a book or start a foundation or, not everyone's going to do that. And that's okay. There's all different ways to help and to be a part of the prevention movement because it needs, we need to address it from so many different angles. And that was, I think, the part of the birth of Black Box Project was like, look, what we've been doing for the last 30 odd years is not moving the needle enough.
No,
we've got to approach this in different ways. We've got to look at this in other ways. And these just, these are, they know more. Sometimes they know more about our lives than our friends and family do. Right. And
Kim, I wanted to go back to something you said real quick.
Yeah.
That you said didn't happen often. It did happen to my family. My dad died in 92. There were no devices. What, if any, guardrails do you have in place or support for families that do learn things that they did not know, which is hugely painful. And it really made me think, it reminded me that happened, and I don't know, maybe Dennis, you did too, but
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, and I maybe I should qualify that. I mean, I think, sort of like the Lifetime movie scenario where, you learn that someone had a complete different life, after that, I think doesn't happen incredibly often. People do learn things that they didn't know, which actually makes sense in the case of suicide loss, right? I mean, I distinctly remember feeling like, I don't know that I knew my brother as well as I thought I did. And that is also part of the shock and the trauma and the loss, right?
Yeah.
I think in my brother's case, I mean, he got really, really good at hiding what he was going through, right? And I think that, that piece can be common. So, again, because it's just my nature, I don't know how to do it any other way. Although officially Black Box Project, our purpose is not grief support. I don't know how to do it any don't know how to work with someone any other way. So I build a relationship with them. We'll talk about the different supports. I become a peer support for them because I am, right? It's not about my loss, but I can identify with lots of pieces of what they're experiencing. And I, really make it a priority to just be versed in every type of resource out there as much as possible. And, we'll personally make inroads with those, various organizations that provide support and, so that I can make warm handoffs and, feel good about any type of, referring that I would do, and referral in a really informal way, right? Because I know this can be just one of those added complicators, an added layer that now you're dealing with, a gambling debt that you didn't know existed before. Now you're dealing with, whatever that just complicates your grief. Again, doesn't change what happened, right? Doesn't change that you lost someone that you loved, but it can impact your grief now, right? So to make sure, even if it's been however many years, right? I always will say, like, look, if this happens, and if you do learn things, like, make sure you've got some supports in place just in case. And if you need more, I'm here. If you want to share with me, if you need a listening ear, I'm here. I think the important thing or it's important to me, we address it with them. We talk about this is a possibility, and they may have some suspicions ahead of time, but sometimes, it is a shock. If they decide. Some families will say, like, no, I don't, I'm going to put the pin you gave me in an envelope and put it in my family safe. And, if we decide in 5 years to go through it, knowing that we have the ability to go see that sometimes is enough, right? Like sometimes like, okay, it's not a mystery anymore. I can go down that rabbit hole if I want to. At least now I have the ability, versus when it was locked and I didn't have access, that was a brick wall. But now I know that I can, and now I have a little more control over when I decide, if I decide to do that. So yeah, it's a valid concern. And, we talk about it. We definitely, we talk about it.
Kim, you may be in a perfect spot being a survivor yourself now with your master's degree in social work. And if you see me turning my head, I have another screen over here. I'm on your website as we speak, and you all do list resources.
Yeah.
Find a group. I see it on there. You have TAPS on there. You have grief counseling.
Yeah.
You're not going to let these people be alone. And then you, being the family engagement specialist that you are.
Yeah.
I feel like folks who are on the fence, like, I don't know if I want to do this. My older brother had a suicide note, and I have not read it to this day, nor do I want to.
Yeah.
But that's just I just don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
If he's in there saying, oh, I don't need, gone is gone. My mom had it. I don't need to see it. And I often worry, did he say something about me in there? I don't want to know. Ignorance is bliss, but digital device, I imagine now with too, because there's a lawsuit out there, the AI chats that are available now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I heard you sigh. What is that?
AI.
It's scary as all heck. I mean, to me anyway, it really, really is. At the beginning of this project, and I say we, even though I wasn't involved in it then, made that decision there are certain things that we are not going to sort of look for or access in a digital device. Like, we prefer a device, if the family does have access to it, if they can put it in airplane mode when they send it to us, we prefer that. We don't want it to connect, to any rogue Wi-Fi or anything like that.
Yeah.
Because we're trying to capture, like I said, a snapshot of what lives on that device, that was up until the time of that person's death, right? In the future, many people have said, well, okay, but like, what about their social media comments, or, anything they posted, or what about a conversation with AI, or what, like that could be valid data, right? Like, yeah, I mean, it could be. Lots of that may live in the cloud of whatever, use Apple or, Google or whatever, Android. So that might be accessible other ways, right? But for now and for the foreseeable future, we made that decision of like, this is what we're going to focus on, these types of data that we believe, is in the device and holds incredible value. And, while again, the AI conversation, I mean, that's just I don't know where that's going to go in our society. I just it is a whole, it cannot take, I don't care how smart it gets, it cannot take the place of human compassion and human, and I am led by my gut in so many ways. I mean, I know feelings are not facts and, but like I rely, like my gut is an informed gut feeling. An AI can never have that, right? AI can never, have that. That is, I think, uniquely human. It's interesting. The first chunk of data from Black Box Project, we actually released a white paper last summer, August of 2025, that was about the first findings, right? It was fascinating in the sense that we kind of termed it this way, that with the digital data, people's sort of digital life, there's your external persona, and that's any way through your device that you kind of communicate with the outside world, right? So texting, emailing, and, there's every which way you can message, right? You can text, you can send a Facebook message, you can Instagram, you can WhatsApp, you can, Snapchat, TikTok, all the different ways. All the ways that you communicate externally, and communicate might also be like picking up when your phone rings and you pick it up, right? That is a form of communication externally, right? You've answered that call, you've responded, versus your internal persona with your device, which is everything that is between just you and the phone, right? So your notes app, things you put in there, things you save, things you bookmark, just those things that are private between you and your phone. And what was fascinating is in the data that we looked at, going as far back as almost a year, that external persona can remain relatively consistent and stable, right? And didn't show a lot of signs of crisis or change. Just, it was stable. At the very same time, while the internal persona, as it got closer and closer to the date of death, started not only showing signs of crisis in, things that maybe they were searching, again, things they were saving, but also showed a cycle of times of crisis and stress and increased maybe risk, but also resource seeking and help seeking. So maybe while at the very same time, this external persona is looking pretty stable, internally, there might have been in a cycle of researching methods, but then also researching resources and looking for faith supports. And so what that proved to us was proof positive that there is space for interventions, right? There is space for interventions to be built and get in there. And, we attempt survivors share that, they've got some ambiguity, right? At the very, when they are just about to attempt. This to us was like proof positive. There's that ambiguity. There's a window. Get in there. We've got to, find a way to get in there. This thing knows if I fall down the stairs, right? There's got to be a way that we can, still respect and maintain people's privacy, but also get there when they need it and get there when they're in crisis. It was just fascinating. So, this is why we, our belief is that this can impact the field in general, not for every high risk population, and it can just impact it in some really big ways.
There's a suicide prevention message there in a way. It's like, listen, folks, if I'm talking to an audience, if you could let your internal persona show itself, be vulnerable, back to my camouflage hat.
It links, full circle.
You could get help, but those are probably two different worlds, man. What we look like on the outside and then inside.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you're seeing it. You're literally you're seeing it. We all know it exists, but now you're like proof positive. This on the outside, this smile. And one of my favorite pictures I put up every now and then, I call it the blindside suicide, where the person blindsided everybody. They didn't show the signs or symptoms.
Yeah.
Is a guy that's smiling. It's a cartoon, and inside he's curled up like a little kid with his blanket.
Yeah.
And that's the internal persona.
The fact that this data, we kind of had a hunch, right? We had, sort of maybe some informed hunches, but we needed the data to prove it, right? But that these proved that there is that ambiguity and that there's a window, right? Like that shows you there is a window that and it may not be us, right? Black Box Project, we may not be in the business of building those interventions, but the thing that alerts people, but someone out there is. And that's why, we are committed to making this data available and letting imagine if this data could be and still maintain privacy and security and all that, but this data could be utilized alongside medical records data and maybe the crisis line, their data, like just to get a much more informed, larger picture of what is happening and where those interventions, where they need to be created, where they don't exist, right? Where they don't exist. I spoke with a dad last year. His son was in college and his son died by suicide, and he actually had access to his son's device, and he went through it. He saw his son every Saturday for dinner, and was like, we didn't see anything. We didn't know. I didn't know. His brothers didn't know. We didn't know. But you know who knew? His phone. His son's name was Manny. And he's like, Manny's phone knew. I saw what he was at. I saw, he had a whole journal in there.
Oh, yeah.
Manny's phone knew. Where was the Manny alert? Where was the Manny alert that something was happening for this kiddo and he needed help? And that's the exact purpose of this, to create, yep, we know, that we have a window now. We can see when folks are in crisis. We've got to build, we know that it happens. We've got to build that intervention that doesn't exist now, and we live in a digital world now.
I'm sold. I know the internal persona is different than the external. How do people get a hold of you? How do they
So I'm
reach
a
out?
one-man show, and the best way, so our website, in fact, there's a newer website that speaks a little bit towards sort of the research side of this. So, and our potential partners, in the world of suicide prevention and postvention. But that website is BBX, that's our shorthand for the project, bbxproject. That is a website, and you can click right into, there's a page for families in there, and you can click right in and connect to actually my calendar and schedule either a call or a Zoom meeting with me.
We'll put that in the show link. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. My ask always is, let's explore it. You don't have to commit to anything. Again, we understand the weightiness of this ask. I've had families come back to me a year after our initial conversation and say, yeah, I wasn't ready, but I am now. I am now. And we get it. I get it completely. And we are here. We're not going anywhere. So whenever someone is ready, we are intently seeking to grow our data and grow this project and, connect more families to each other who are united in this purpose of we're going to do something about this, but also we understand, it takes some people some time, and everyone's different. I've had some families go, the first time they hear about it, absolutely. Yep. I am honored to, have them contribute to this. Here you go. How do I get it to you? I need to get it to you, right away. And others need some time, and it's okay. It's all okay.
That's fair. Everyone's different. And Kim Burnett Bartlett, this has been an eye-opener. I'm so glad you're doing what you're doing, because postvention is prevention.
Yeah.
And these devices know more about us. I'm going to wrap it up here. We try to keep these about half hour, so I could talk to you all day about this.
Thank you.
I'm fascinated by this because the data lake that you referred to is so needed in this industry, because for years it wasn't even a pond. It wasn't even a puddle. We had nothing. Jess has to run. That's why she's waving to us goodbye if you're looking online.
Sorry.
Be good.
Got to go do more work in South Carolina.
That's
See
it.
you guys later.
But I want to let you have the final word on all of this. What would you tell people, how to get, your bbxproject.org? What else do I got to know? And then we'll bring it home.
Like I said, if it's something that a family is considering, you're not committing, you're not promising anything. There is no pressure. We understand, and we will always, our true purpose is to honor those who, those that we've lost, because none of this would be possible without their families making this, huge decision to be a part of this. And we know it's just such an honor to connect with them and be a part of their healing, and have them stand shoulder to shoulder with us to make sure that no other families have to go through it too. So
that's right. We're in a club. We want no more members. Thank you for what you're doing. It started out with the military with Stop Soldier Suicide.
Yeah.
And then it branched out to everybody. This is available. Black Box is available to everybody on the planet. You loan them your devices, they check it, and they give it back to you. And then we go forward trying to prevent future occurrences. The number for completed suicides in the 2024 data set went down a little bit. It went down like 2%.
Yeah.
It's still 48,000, too high. Yeah. And you and I both know one is too many.
One is too many.
So God bless you and your team and the work you're doing. I'm so glad we had you on today to share this. Yeah. People need to know about it. And I'm going to preach far and wide about this where I'm doing my talks and out and about, letting people know postvention. If you lost somebody, you want to know what's the internal persona versus the external, and help others down the road I will put them in touch with you for
Thank
sure.
you so much. Thank you. And anything that we can do to support you as well, Dennis, your work is incredibly important too. Please, let us know. We'd be honored to help.
Well, in honor of our siblings,
Yeah.
we have found purpose in our pain, and what was intended for evil, we're gonna, God intended for good, and we're gonna make some good out of this.
Absolutely.
And then at night, we'll sleep well at night, missing our loved ones. There's pictures of my brothers behind me,
Yeah,
and
my brother's back there. There he is.
yeah, we honor them in our own little way, and you're doing a great work with the
Thank you.
bbxproject.org. That's
Thank
the
you for this.
website. Thank you for doing it, and thank you for coming on.
Appreciate it so much.
That's it. It's a tough subject. I told you it's a tough subject, and Kim and the team there is going to try to help make it a not so tough subject by giving you access to some stuff that we all need to know. And the goal is to prevent future occurrences. So postvention is prevention. I'll stop right there.